Hello, I am popping in this afternoon because anyone that was paying attention to Emmy Foggy Dog's Twitter today will know that I received a response from the Department of Health and Social Care, and it relates to an email I sent them on the 13th of January. So it's actually quite a quick turnaround. I was quite impressed. Normally I have to wait 3 months, so that's good. About my concerns with the extensive rollout of non-pharmaceutical treatments, in particular social prescribing, across the board, across the NHS, to support people with long-term conditions and disabilities and health problems, whatever. Because anyone with ME, CFS, any ME advocates, campaigners, and in particular me with my stripy light bulb head on too, will know that however innocently meant the recommendations to increase your exertion are, if you do not understand post-exertional malaise, you are going to harm people living with ME CFS. And by that, I don't mean, telling us to go to the gym. We know that we shouldn't really be going to the gym. But it's things like encouraging us to go out and have a nature walk, do a jigsaw puzzle, go and have a coffee. Things like that seem very innocuous to most human beings. But when you've got ME, we just don't have the energy to do things spontaneously without thinking, hang on, if I spend energy on that, it means I can't get up the stairs to go to the toilet, or if I do that, it means I can't cook my dinner, and because we've got a finite, tiny amount of energy. And it, there is the argument, well, if you've got ME and you know that you shouldn't be doing that, then just say no. 85% of people who meet the criteria for ME CFS never receive a diagnosis. So unless you know you actually have ME CFS, you wouldn't know that you also have post-exertional malaise. Which is why with my other hat on just for a minute, which is why with Stripy Lightbulb, we say we're not training people to be able to diagnose anyone because, I'm not a doctor, medically trained people wouldn't take advice from someone that isn't medically trained. I get that. But I do show how to identify what ME and post-exertional malaise looks like so you know how to adapt to take that into consideration. Don't offer things that are going to cause that person to overexert, things like that. There are ways to identify PEM without a medical test. There has to be, because there is no medical, as in, blood test or anything like that. There's no scan you can do to see if you've got ME. So I got in touch with the Department of Health and Social Care and said, I am really concerned, particularly with half of long COVID cases that are still sick at the 1 year point now meeting the diagnostic criteria for ME CFS. That's something that isn't commonly known. Long COVID, I'm doing that because that's the name, but underneath that umbrella are an awful lot of other conditions, heart problems, breathing difficulties, chronic illnesses like fibro, POTS, all that kind of stuff are triggered by COVID-19 and are under the umbrella of long COVID. Anyway, in case you didn't know that. And, in 20 years' time, we may well know scientifically whether long COVID ME CFS is exactly the same as any other trigger. At the moment, we can only go by the diagnostic criteria. And at the moment, if you meet ME CFS diagnostic criteria, you should, if you have the opportunity, get an ME CFS diagnosis. So my point, there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who now have ME CFS, or that includes, because it's the key characteristic of ME CFS, that also have post-exertional malaise, that haven't got a diagnosis, and that are now being told to seek help from social prescribers who can help them to feel a sense of well-being. Which, as I said, sounds perfectly innocent. It's not a medicine. It's not going to harm you. Surely it is, if the one thing that is known to harm you if you live with ME CFS is exertion. And that's mental exertion, jigsaw puzzle. I did jigsaw puzzles over Christmas and New Year. I managed one and I got it out. I put the table out and everything. I think I managed 10 minutes in 3 weeks because I literally memorized the shape of the piece. By the time I switched my attention, I'd forgotten. It takes an awful lot of concentration. That's mental energy, cognitive energy. So even recommending something like doing jigsaw puzzles with family. If you do not know that you have post-exertional malaise as part of ME/CFS, you won't know that that will cause you to deteriorate, decline, either temporarily a couple of days after, or possibly lead to longer term decline. That's my key concern, that this innocent, oh, we're only telling you to go and socialise with a few people over coffee, or we're only telling you to go for a nature walk. There's no medicine involved here. Sounds perfectly innocent until you realise just how much harm overexertion can cause someone living with ME/CFS. Anyway, so I received a reply from Department of Health and Social Care this morning, and anyone that's an advocate that's watching this, it was a pretty standard, generic, this is all the stuff the government's done for ME/CFS over the past 5 years. Nice guideline. ME/CFS delivery plan. The Decode ME study, as if 3.2 million means that we shouldn't actually be getting hundreds of millions of pounds more research funding. Who knew? Anyway, so it was a very generic email. Didn't answer my question. Surprise, surprise, never does. But right at the bottom, it said something like, social work link workers is what they call social prescriber link workers, SPLWs, will have potential to do the NHS England training, and we think it's a positive way forward, blah blah blah. I personally know social prescribers who I have spoken to about this directly, and they've said, we are not medically trained. We wouldn't have access to that NHS England training. So I'm like, I've got training on Shopee Lightbulb. You can learn about ME/CFS from a patient perspective, but everything is fully evidence-based. There's the latest science and all the research studies you could possibly want to look at. I break down the jargon, make it easily understandable. That training is available. But the government seems to think that social prescribers are going to be doing NHS England's ME/CFS specific training. Social prescribers are not medically trained. And they know that. They admit that. They're not supposed to be condition specific. They're just for general sense of well-being. Let's give you a better sense of self and get you doing stuff and, realizing there's more to life than just your health, etc., that kind of thing. Anyway, so the email was virtually useless. So I've just written them an email, and that's what this video is about now. I'm like 8 minutes in. I'm going to read to you my email. I'm not going to turn it into a blog because it would just get lost on the website. So if you're interested in what I actually wrote back, feel free to listen. If you've got ME, just don't bother watching, just listen. And I will read it from the screen. Right, so it was actually sent to Wes Streeting, but I got a response from the correspondence officer. So I wrote back, "Dear correspondence officer, thank you for your reply. I appreciate the acknowledgement of my correspondence, though I must note that the response provided appears to be a generic summary of existing policy rather than an engagement with the specific and urgent concerns I raised. Whilst the ME/CFS delivery plan, Decode ME and ongoing research funding are important initiatives, they do not address the core issue at hand. My original email highlighted a clear and immediate risk arising from the rapid expansion of non-pharmacological treatments and social prescribing without mandatory condition-specific training for the workforce delivering these interventions. Your response does not speak to this risk. The training you reference, developed with NHS England, is explicitly aimed at healthcare professionals. Social prescribing link workers, however, are not medically trained, not clinically regulated, and will not be included in this training programme. This distinction is critical. SPLWs are increasingly positioned as a first point of contact, yet they are not equipped to understand or identify post-exertional malaise, PEM, the hallmark symptom of ME/CFS, nor the risks associated with physical, cognitive, or emotional exertion. This is not a theoretical concern. Without appropriate training, SPLWs may unknowingly recommend activities such as nature walks, group sessions, volunteering, arts programs, or building stamina that are assumed to be benign but can cause significant, sometimes long-term deterioration in people with ME/CFS. NICE NG206, which is the NICE guideline, the latest one, is clear about the dangers of overexertion, but SPLWs are not required to follow NICE guidance, nor are they trained to interpret it. I should say no one has to it's not mandatory. So even healthcare professionals are not mandatory told you have to follow that. Too many times I'm told, oh yeah, no, we just speak to the patient, they tell us what they want, what they don't want. And it's like, if you're a new patient without a diagnosis, you wouldn't know that. Anyway, to continue, your response emphasizes that social prescribing is not limited to physical activity and focuses on what matters to me conversations. However, this does not mitigate the risk. PEM can be triggered by mental, emotional, or sensory exertion, as well as physical activity. And without mandatory training, SPLWs cannot be expected to recognize or prevent these harms. You also note that the social prescribing workforce is encouraged to access condition-specific training. Encouragement is not sufficient. The government is expanding social prescribing at scale because it's cheap. I didn't put that, but because it's cheap. Yet there is still no mandatory ME or PEM training. No requirement to record adverse outcomes that I've been campaigning on since 2021. Something else that they're not taken seriously, and no national mechanism to capture harms. This is a serious gap in safeguarding and governance. The government's collaboration with charities, clinicians, and people with lived experience, while welcome, does not resolve the fundamental issue that policy is being implemented without the necessary protections in place. Research funding and stakeholder engagement do not negate the risks created by deploying untrained staff to support a patient population for whom exertion can be dangerous. I therefore repeat my central question, which remains unanswered. What steps will the department take to ensure that social prescribing link workers receive mandatory ME and or PEM specific training? Because to be clear, out of all the training people need to do about ME, it's the PEM. If we overexert, we deteriorate either temporarily or over a much longer term. So it's that bit that is absolutely crucial for people to learn about. Anyway, so sorry. ME, PEM specific training aligned with NICE NG206 before they are expected to support people with ME/CFS or long COVID, because as I've said, under that umbrella of long COVID are a heck of a lot of people who meet ME/CFS diagnostic criteria and have post-exertional malaise. And that's why this social prescribing thing is being rolled out so quickly and so widely, because they don't have the money to offer us proper treatments or invest in research to offer us treatments. So they're chucking this cheap alternative at us, but actually there is a real risk of harm, and we've got nowhere to report that harm because it is not a medicine or an appliance. And as I said 2 minutes ago, that's something that I've been campaigning for since 2021. Something else that they've said, there's no need for that. The NICE guideline is there. No one is going to tell you to overexert. But what are they doing now? This matter is urgent. The potential for harm is significant, foreseeable and preventable. As social prescribing continues to expand, the absence of mandatory training and harm reporting mechanisms places people with ME/CFS at unacceptable risk. I would welcome the opportunity to discuss this further and to contribute constructively to the development of safe, evidence-based policy. There you go. So that's what I sent them. It's weird, even though at the time I don't think about it, it does link back to Shake It Up, which people that haven't been paying attention, Shake It Up is my campaign that I launched literally within weeks of the NICE guideline being launched in 2021. Because during that review process, it was claimed extensively that there is no evidence of harm because no one had ever reported harms from graded exercise therapy or CBT. And as a community, as a whole, lots of people shouted at their phones and said, hang on, I reported my harm to my GP practice, my CFS clinic, my CCG to my MP, whoever. Thousands of reports of harm. They are not collated or collected anywhere centrally. So the government is making these policy decisions without data. So now anyone that is harmed by going to see a social prescriber and not knowing that they have post-exertional malaise, that they shouldn't overdo it, that goes on a nature walk on the advice of a social prescriber has nowhere to report that harm. Nowhere. And hundreds of thousands of people newly sick with ME/CFS-like symptoms have just been abandoned and told, go for a walk. So if you're watching this and have no idea what I'm talking about, please do check out emmyfoggydog.org. In the campaigns tab is Shake It Up. Have a read and see what work I've done on that already. But we need that. If the government is now going down the non-pharmaceutical route because it's cheap and because, there's so many people now with chronic illness, we can't cope, we haven't got the money, maybe they should have thought of that decades ago when we started saying we need more research funding, we need treatments, and we need to be taken seriously, because now the pandemic has made our community quadruple and we're still in exactly the same place. Anyway, so now you can see why I'm pushing this social prescriber thing. And social prescribers themselves say, yeah, we're of value to lots of different patient groups, and even some people with ME go and see, who know about PEM, go and see a social prescriber and say, well, I can't do that and I can't do that, but I'll give that a go. And, it goes very well. And they've got lots of positive things to say about social prescribers. My worry is that people that do not know what their own limits are and don't know they have post-exertional malaise, because there are many hundreds of thousands new to our community who have yet to be diagnosed, will undertake all of these activities to try and get back to their previous self, and it's not going to work, and it's going to end up harming them. And I can say that confidently because I've been part of our community on social media for over a decade, and I've spoken to thousands of people who've also been harmed, not by social prescribers or social prescribing, but by their GP, just like myself, casually told to, just take your dog for more walks, that's fine, you're deconditioned, just go for a walk. ME/CFS is not deconditioning. And if you want to argue that point with me, I can send you the research. Anyway, so there you go. That's today's update. Yet another silly email from Department of Health and Social Care. But I have email back. But I think, in fairness to them, I think they are inundated and they send one generic one out in the hope that it will make everything stop. No, I'm going to continue. I'm going to email you back. Unfortunately, the cold weather has made my ME flare since Christmas. The weather has made my ME flare. But as soon as my ME calms back down again, I will be reigniting all of these campaigns. So please do keep your eyes peeled. Hope you're doing okay today by your own standards, and I'll catch you again soon.